6 years ago, the Canadian government had been a beacon of hope for the Rohingya people, and that included the American government as well. They had led a renowned international response for Rohingya refugees that were fleeing the genocide in Rakhine State at the time. But today, a lot of people feel that this leadership in North America has faded. And as the crisis deepens, Canada, as well as the United States, is turning its back on Indigenous Rohingya of Myanmar-Burma. In recent weeks, the situation in Maung Dao City has reached new levels of brutality under the Arakan Army's control. The Rohingya community, which was once over 1 million strong in Rakhine State, has been decimated. And now just 600,000 remain. They are trapped in a relentless cycle of violence and persecution. Families are huddled in makeshift shelters, drones hover above, and the bodies of those desperate to flee are washing up along the Naf River. And Bangladesh, which is overwhelmed and tightening its borders, is still offering very little hope for those who escape. And the urgency for action has never been more critical than now. Tonight, we gather not just to remember the past, but to call for renewed action with the important voices of Rohingya across North America. Canada, as well as the US, must continue to support Rohingya in helping themselves, to establish emergency immigration pathways, and to ensure that the voices of those Rohingya are at the forefront of any kind of solution. And speaking about voices and solutions, I'm so honored to go ahead and move on to the first part of our program, which is opening statements from 3 wonderful panelists today that represent advocates from across North America, the United States, and Canada. I wanted to begin with introducing the very lovely Siti Ayub. She's a graduate student at Marquette University. She's pursuing her degree in student affairs and higher education, and she serves as the Director of Education and Mental Health Services at the Rohingya Maìyafuìnor Collaborative Network, a women-led organization focused on Rohingya human rights, education, as well as mental health. Having migrated from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to Milwaukee in 2013, Siti is dedicated to advocating for her community and aspires to become an academic advisor, supporting students in their educational journeys. Thank you so much, Siti. Please go ahead.
Yes, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come here and talk a little bit more about what I am doing right now with the Rohingya Maìyafuìnor Collaborative Network, in short, RMCN. I would like to share a little personal reflection of how I grew up and also what have been being the leading light of who I am right now. I was born in Malaysia, like it was mentioned before. My parents were displaced from Burma, which is Myanmar, to Malaysia. And growing up, it was a struggle. We couldn't go to school. It's not safe for any Rohingya people in Malaysia. And I feel like the thing that really stuck with me was the fact that education was being denied since I was at a really young age. And I didn't get educated until I was the age of 8. That's when I learned how to read and write. And this was also due to the fact that it was an opportunity that was given to us from like different organizations that started Rohingya refugee schools and institute. And because of that, I was able to do what I'm doing right now after coming to America 10 years ago and be here right now doing my graduate studies. So my statement is really short. There are a couple of things that I really would like to emphasize is that the Rohingya community is in need for support for education and also mental health support for the recent victim and those who have been stuck in the camp for the past 7 years. It's been going on for so long, but the past 7 years is the emphasis. And whatever the public or even the government does, it needs to be in the best interest of the Rohingya community, and these policies toward education and also psychosocial support will be a test of how well the policy work. And my belief is that everyone should support the Rohingya-led initiative and humanitarian organization, just so we can better support and stop this genocide. So yeah, that's me. It was nice to see everyone.
Thank you so much, Siti. That was super helpful to get to know you and the work that you're doing, as well as the benefit that's coming out of it. So we'll circle back soon to ask you some questions and to delve a little bit more into the amazing advocacy that you're doing where you are in America. And I'm excited to introduce your colleague, in fact, Yasmin Ullah, who is also a Rohingya advocate. She's a feminist and author, a poet, as well as a social justice activist born in northern Arakan of Burma, Myanmar. After fleeing to Thailand as a child in 1995, she eventually settled in Canada in 2011. Yasmin is the founder and executive director of the Rohingya Maìyafuìnor Collaborative Network, a woman-led organization focused on Rohingya human rights, education, and solidarity. She previously served as president of the Rohingya Human Rights Network, leading efforts across Canada. Yasmin's work spans globally, including advocacy for genocide recognition in countries like Canada and the US. She chairs the ASEAN Burma board and serves on the boards of the US campaign for Burma and Bridges Myanmar Youth Dialect Project. Her creative works include the anthology I Am a Rohingya and the children's book Hefsa and the Magical Ring, which reflects on the experiences of Rohingya children. Yasmin is a 2023 UN Minority Fellow and was named on the Femilist 100 in 2021 for her contributions to foreign policy, peace building, and activism. And I could spend so much more time talking about the background and wonderful expertise of all of our speakers, but unfortunately we have to stop there. So Yasmin, please go ahead and share with us your opening statement for the evening.
Thank you very much. That's such a kind introduction. I first of all would like to thank Justice for All for inviting me and for hosting this very timely webinar and discussion. I think that it's always difficult to actually bring about the discussion that is still, a situation that's ongoing. We are trying our very, very best to actually ensure that the work gets continued, but also at the same time that the international community is actually informed. As a Rohingya woman and as a longtime advocate for this community, this year has been particularly tough for us. Since 2017, only about 20% of Rohingya remained in our ancestral homeland. And this is out of 2.5 million Rohingya estimated across the globe. And according to Doctors Without Borders, only 1% of Rohingya across the board currently live in freedom. It's a striking number, and it's saddening, beyond saddening, that this is such a small number of Rohingya that can actually enjoy freedom and live in relative peace. Against the backdrop of 2017 attacks, though, things have not really looked up since, over the past 7 years. Since January this year, especially, violent attacks, forced conscription, looting, scorched earth campaigns like burning down of houses, villages, drone attacks, heavy artillery use, and sexual and gender-based violence have become more and more rampant once again. As thousands of Rohingya men and boys were, threatened into fighting and have been forcefully conscripted, and have become or have been used as human shields for both the Myanmar military and the Rakhine ethnic armed organization called the Arakan Army, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya have been internally displaced. Current estimate number by us and Women Peace Network, which is another women-led organization in the Rohingya community, over 540,000 Rohingya out of 600,000 that currently remain inside Arakan are currently without a home and could not return home. They're all in desperate need of food, water, shelter, medication, and other basic items. We were fortunate enough to be able to provide some level of emergency support, but access have become so difficult, and beyond that, the funding has dwindled significantly. After the recent attacks, though, in the past 3 weeks by hostile and racist force like the Arakan army, thousands of Rohingya fled to the border of Bangladesh. Some were shot down by drones, and this is happening while they fled as well. Some have drowned in the river Naf that divides the two borders between Myanmar and Bangladesh. Most of whom, that have drowned are children and women. Our network have stepped in as soon as we could, and we stepped in early on to support some of the rescue work and distribution of basic items, children's clothes, food items, feminine hygiene, so on and so forth. We are at the end of our, of the amount that we've raised. With only $9,000 in our hand, 400 families were given the initial support to extend their lifeline. We're in need of so much more because currently we are one of the very few organizations on the ground to do this. UNHCR, IOM, many other humanitarian organizations, especially the international NGOs, have not stepped in at all. And the weight can be felt on the ground, especially by community organizers and our team on the ground. To be able to sustain over 10,000 Rohingya victims who have just fled from Myanmar, we need far, far more. And this brings me to the plea to all of you that we cannot do this work alone. And any support given will extend people's lives on the ground in ways that are invaluable. So please support us by following our work. We're a lot more active on Instagram, and you can search up Rohingya Women Collaborative. And there will be a link for you to donate to our GoFundMe campaign. If not, if you feel, some type of ways to actually contribute on GoFundMe, please feel free to reach out. Our DMs are opened and our emails are available as well. I'm sure Justice for All will make sure that that happens. I think that, that covers the ground of what we hope that the role of North American Muslims could be against the backdrop of so many other atrocities that are currently happening. We need to understand that all of them are actually intertwined. The Palestinian genocide took place because of, the terrible, the kind of terror that the Israeli state has concocted and has perpetrated. At the same time, I don't think that people understand or know that the Israeli government actually have supported the Myanmar junta for the longest time in terms of arms and weapons. All of the perpetrators are interconnected and interlinked in some ways, and a lot of these have, rings. A lot of these have connection to business and human rights, and economic incentives will always be the root cause of all of the atrocity that we see across the globe. The Rohingya are no different. Our shore or our coastline is full of natural gas, and thus why the Belt and Roads Initiative of China actually expanded to the Bay of Bengal through Arakan, through our ancestral homeland. Hence, that's the reason why the Myanmar military want to expel us out of those lands so much. And currently, the land that has been burned down and bulldozed are currently completely erased of the trace of Rohingya. So we need to be aware that all of these genocides and mass atrocities are all interconnected, and we cannot leave anyone behind, because one person left behind means that we do not solve this, the crisis at all, and do not hold, and we're going to be unable to actually hold the perpetrators accountable. Beyond this, I think that there needs to be far more done in terms of advocacy and ensuring and pressuring the Canadian government and the US government to actually focus humanitarian support and any other support in terms of human rights towards the Rohingya-led and refugee-led and, community-led initiatives and organizations. A lot of money have been spent, hundreds of millions of dollars, where, as I've told you, the example of $9,000 that were stretched so far for the initial support to 400 families. These are thousands of people that we're able to help with just small amount of funds. Imagine what we can do with 1 million. Imagine with what we can do with 10 million. And that's not even, that's not scratching the surface of how much humanitarian support and aid has been sent to Bangladesh and other areas. And so I think at the end, it is important that the Canadian government, stakeholders, and all people who are involved and interested in ending the Rohingya genocide to actually help us push further the idea that all of the solutions lie in the community-led organizations and community-led initiatives, as well as the consistent consultation with the community. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking from the heart and for providing us with a really good snapshot of the work on the ground from diaspora, wonderful leadership such as yourself and our co-panelists today. We will definitely also circle back to Yasmin to go deeper into her work and to understand the benefits and the impact of women-led movements across North America for Rohingya. And thank you for touching on Palestine genocide and the similarities there. And last but certainly not least, we are very excited to speak with our third panelist today, Raïss Tinmaung, who is a Rohingya from Ayub. He's currently based out of Toronto. He is the founder and board chair of the Rohingya Human Rights Network, a coalition of civil society organizations within Rohingya refugee camps, supported by diaspora members and allies. Raïss has spearheaded numerous campaigns, petitions, peaceful rallies, and media production initiatives, all aimed at preserving Rohingya identity and raising awareness. He's led delegations to present at significant institutions, including Canadian Parliament, the Museum for Human Rights, the Montreal Holocaust Museum, and the UN's Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, as well as the International Court of Justice as well. Beyond this kind of lengthy advocacy, Raïss leads a charity that supports education and vocational training for Rohingya diaspora and host communities across Burma, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Pakistan. He has also contributed to long-term development projects in Haiti, Ecuador, and South Africa. Additionally, as we're on the topic of Palestine, Raïss is also actively involved in Palestinian activism, leading a local Toronto chapter. Welcome to the discussion. Brother Raïss, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Welcome, salam. You're coming in loud and clear. Good to be
That's
with
great.
you.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and Jazakallah khair to everybody to come and join us and to participate, and for Justice for All as well to organize this. You mentioned I'm the founder and the board chair. I'm not the only founder. It was a collective of us that founded. There were about 10 people, and including Sister Yasmin, who was one of the co-founders, mashallah. Very glad to be here with Sister Yasmin and Sister Siti as well. I'll keep my introduction or my introductory message very brief. The situation in Rakhine is very dire. Amongst my own close family members, there have been deaths. People have have run away from Maungdaw. They are living in northwestern Maungdaw as we speak. Some of them had to inevitably cross the river to Chittagong. A lot of my teammates from the refugee camps they collected dead bodies floating and coming to the other side of the river. They pray janaza on the shores. A lot of it doesn't get covered because the rest of the world is very busy covering politics in the US, the elections, and to a certain extent in Canadian and US media about what's happening in Palestine in a very censored way. So it's a pity. The Ummah is very separated, it's very scattered, and that's where we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing, and how will we answer when Allah Ta'ala asks us on the Day of Judgment. So for the efforts that my teammates do in the refugee camps and in the villages, we primarily focus on increasing our capacity, or the capacity within the Rohingya, to do not only aid and humanitarian work, but also long-term development in education and vocational training, as well as in documentation and memorialization and identity preservation. These are things that we lack, and we really depend on international community. And more we come to question ourselves as to how long can we really rely on international community. We have to build ourselves in order to address things by ourselves. There's a very clear ayah in the Quran saying, "Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta la yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim." So until we change ourselves, until we have capacity amongst ourselves, within ourselves, there's not going to be a visible, a significant change. And that comes from, in all aspects of our challenges, let it be in Gaza, let it be in Burma, let it be in Sudan, let it be anywhere else. So I urge all of you, brothers and sisters, who are joining us today, my dear panelists, everybody over here, that we focus on this aspect of self-development as a community, as an ummah, and use that as our means of bringing about a real impactful change, which we cannot get by always relying on international Western support.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Raïss. I also want to take a moment to salute your courage and your strength, as well as for your co-panelists to be speaking on this topic despite the personal impact that it has on your life. And that's a kind of courage that's definitely not lost on me or any of our audience members today. So thank you so much. And we also look forward to coming around back to you to ask a couple of questions about your work and the impact that your work has had. So thank you. We have concluded with the first segment of our webinar, which is the opening statements. The second and the final portion of our webinar is to pose a series of questions to our panelists to learn more about the situation, their work, and their insights on the current atrocities being committed by various groups in Myanmar, as well as the lack of aid, as our panelists have alluded to. What I will do is go in order of the opening statements. So as we've begun with Siti, and then following with Yasmin and then Raïss, I will go in that cycle. And lastly, before I go ahead and begin with posing the questions, I wanted to really just extend an invitation to our audience member to use the Q&A box on your Zoom screen to share any questions for our panelists, and we'll be so happy to present it to them as well. So beginning with Siti, as the Director of Education and Mental Health Services, the organization where both yourself and Yasmin do incredible work at, what are some of the most significant challenges that you face in providing like education and mental health support? And what is that like? What does that look like when it comes to working with refugees as well, in terms of just some of the challenges that you can share with our audience today?
Yes, thank you for that. Well, I will start off by telling everyone what we have been doing so far this past few months. Within the span of this year, we have had many different humanitarian support programs in different places, such as Arakan, the refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, Aceh, and also other parts of northern Sumatra. And in all these different places, we can begin with Arakan. We could not do anything beyond emergency support. So for emergency support, we provided things like food items, hygiene products, other care items. But anything beyond that was not possible due to the situation being too unstable and too risky for our volunteer and the team on the ground. And that's for Arakan. As for the Cox's Bazar, the only thing that we have been able to do is also emergency services because of the new arrival and the people who just fled across the river in the past few weeks. We have been one of the only few organizations on the ground to provide packages of care, such as, once again, feminine hygiene, food, snacks, and other things that are needed for the time being. And keep in mind, those would not stretch very far either. I would say the maximum it would last is about 2 weeks. And this is only if they consume a very small amount every day. And because of that, we are continuing to raise funds online through GoFundMe and among our friends and family, just to ensure that we can keep people afloat until bigger humanitarian organizations actually recognize their roles and responsibilities here and actually step in. Well, while we wait, we cannot leave this victim to starve. It is imperative that all of you who have been tuned in today to also please step in and make it easier for us to help the Rohingya victims. When it comes to Aceh and also Indonesia, we have been able to do more than just the emergency aid, which was provided back in November last year. We have been able to expand our education programs inside the camp, where volunteers among the refugee themselves are teaching other refugee, because there's no access to education outside of for the children at the moment. And honestly, ironically, listen to this, okay? Indonesia is a party for Child's Right Convention, which guarantee their unfettered access to education, regardless their nationality or status. But once again, our Rohingya children are being denied access to education. Now, what the refugee have been stepping up is that they're teaching each other, and majority of the time it's the teenagers who are teaching the young children. We have provided them with books and anything that they have asked for, and those are the things that we have been provided to them. The second thing we are doing in Aceh is starting a computer classes. To this day, we provided about 5 laptops, and to this day, there are programs on ground where women and children are prioritized to be taught computer literacy. And these are Rohingya diaspora helping Rohingya refugee right now. The third thing that we're doing in Aceh right now is psychological training program. This goes on to create and train members of the refugee community in Indonesia to be able to provide immediate and or also emergency counseling support to their own community member. This training is facilitated by the mental health professional on the ground, those who are Indonesian, and they do a few different training with community members and community organizer to ensure that if anything happened, there is someone out there to become the first responder and also help. One of the last thing that we're doing in Aceh right now is providing literacy classes. So literacy classes is to teach fundamental and basic things. For example, teaching our Rohingya refugee the alphabet and also how to write their own name. And we have provided everything from stationery to everything else they need for them to learn. And honestly, this is a story that we have gotten. It's really heartwarming that all the Rohingya women who enroll in this class, while they're washing dishes and also doing house chores, they also are reciting the ABCs. So it's never too late to teach and educate people, and this is the thing that we're seeing right now. And there's so many other programs that we are currently working on right now, but these are some of the things that we are doing in terms of mental health and education support. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think that I wanted to remind the rest of our audience that one of the biggest impact of the refugee crisis and of the Rohingya genocide is education. Currently, according to the latest reports, Rohingya children don't have education past the 3rd grade, according to what's the situation in the camp. So Siti, just to hear the education-based work that you're doing, it's just incredible. And Godspeed to all of your efforts. That's just wonderful. And as was mentioned in the beginning of the program, we will definitely share information about your organization, where people can reach out and where they can support or volunteer after the program concludes. And moving on to Yasmin, a similar question in terms of the work that you're doing at the Collaborative Network, specifically about the intersectionality of the role of women in peace and security. In addition to education being one of those biggest impact, we know that Rohingya women and girls are also one of the biggest recipients of the impact of the atrocities and the crimes against humanity. So that being said, how do you see the intersection of gender and ethnicity impacting the experiences of Rohingya women, both in refugee camps and within the diaspora? And I'll just bunch my question together. Why is the involvement of women such as yourself and your colleague Siti very important in this kind of advocacy work? What kind of results or impacts are we seeing on the ground as a result? Thank you so much for answering this question.
Thank you. That's like a thesis or a dissertation kind of answer. If I have three years to, kind of dissect everything, that probably will bring light to, to what we're currently doing and what is possible. But I think the main point is this. The Rohingya women have been bearing the brunt of the genocide and the impacts of it, wherever they are. It's not just it's not just limited to Arakan or Bangladesh. It lives among us, and it becomes the foundation of this community because women are actually carrier of culture. Women are actually passing down knowledge to their children and to other community members. In our culture, the Rohingya women, elders, Rohingya women, are the ones that are actually holders of wisdoms and knowledge. And usually there are traditions of weaving that brings the whole neighborhood together where, one family would weave, different sort of materials and grass for mats and for other, kitchen household stuff. And while they weave, other families will also come and join them to actually help them weave, because this is not supposed to be an individualistic thing. It's a collective culture, so everyone helps each other. And when other people are in need, Rohingya, this family would also go and help others. The fundamental truth of the Rohingya community is this: when knowledge is passed down through women and through elders. And through this weaving of the culture and weaving the community together, we realize that when the military and when other bad actors actually target Rohingya, they didn't just target everybody. They decide to kill off men. And that's why there's an imbalance of population right now between men and women. And they decide to keep women alive, but traumatized. They decide to attack women in a way that actually leaves them scarred for the rest of their life through genocidal rapes, sexual and gender-based violence, and various other branding, to ensure that there's mark left on their bodies, that they cannot forget about the atrocities that they've endured. Women's body became a site of struggle for ethno-nationalism and for power and for economic incentives, for various other, terrible atrocities that we see playing out. Now, when women actually are displaced to places like Bangladesh, to the refugee camps where funds and humanitarian aid has been dwindling for the past 7 years from the very beginning, and there are no sustainable developmental plan and goals in place to ensure that people are educated, trained, and on top of that, build on the skills that they already have, especially arts and crafts and various other skill set that we bring on, especially us being from an agrarian society. All of this combined have created a disastrous result, which is pushing women further down and ensuring that they don't see the light of the day by way of, empowering themselves through education and through various other autonomous sort of agency-driven sort of activities. Now, because of this, things like having lights on various, having street lights or having lamps installed on various different routes of travel in the camps are not really prioritized in the humanitarian aid realm. Even though that is something so simple and so easy for women to facilitate them to be able to go to the bathroom at night and not feel, that they're going to be fearing for their lives. Things like those things are not actually taken into account. Why? Because there are no consultation with Rohingya women at the table. And all of these combined have actually made it so difficult for women and children to stay in the camps. On top of that, with the ration cut and, less and less humanitarian aid coming to the camps, people are deciding to leave the camps, and they decide on a perilous journey to go to Malaysia, Indonesia, or Thailand. And usually they end up in Indonesia, because Thai border guard and Malaysia border guard, as soon as they see the boat, they push the boats away towards Aceh. Now, coming to November last year, there were 2 boats that were turned away. Two children on board the boat that were turned away for about 3 to 4 days, and they were basically amiss for a while along the water. 2 children died on the boat. And the mothers, I think one of the mothers, she's only 25. She had to decide within the 4 days that she was lost in the sea that she needed to throw the baby overboard, because there are no other options. Where is she going to bury him? These are the exact decisions that Rohingya women have to make. And as heartbreaking, as traumatizing as this sounds, and I'm sorry for not giving you a trigger warning, this is an everyday decision that women in our community have to make. So as long as Rohingya women are never at the table and are consulted at the very tail end of a process, or not, guiding the principles or guiding the humanitarian process or guiding the ways that human rights are actually framed, we are never going to get to a place where we see peace, because we are at the receiving end of what could be the worst decision or the worst atrocity of it all. Without consulting us, without actually bringing us to the table, there is no ending to this. And any peace process that never involves women, and we have examples of Afghanistan right in front of us, where women are actually left behind and are left out of the table of a peace talk, of a negotiation. See where this is going. When women are left out of a conversation or left out of a peace negotiation or a peace building process, it never works. It always collapses. Coming to the example that I gave you, there are many rape cases that happens on board these boats, and we're currently providing aid, especially aid for rape victims and victims of sexual and gender-based violence. We're doing the best that we can, but coming from an empathetic place and compassionate place is not enough. We need to have money. And we need to have a lot of it in order to be able to address all of these aspects of discrimination and policies and practice that actually put us in this position in the first place. So in order to do that, after working with Brother Raïss and after working within the community for a while, I realized there's a huge gap and a huge hole to be filled. And without actually bringing up or bringing about, a force of women to actually combat all of these different issues in various different fields of expertise, we would never go anywhere as a community. And the easiest place, perhaps, to actually build on this capacity might be in the diaspora, where the resources are already quite, abundant as far as, the Rohingya community is concerned. And so Siti, for example, is a graduate student in education aspect. We have software engineer, we have a social worker, we have an accountant, we have many capable Rohingya women who can jump in to do the work. The issue is they do not have the opportunities to actually access or be trained in a way that would be compassionate enough, realizing and recognizing the trauma that they have to carry, the trauma of displacement and various other struggles that they have to go through. And I realized, okay, we need to create a space and a compassionate place in order for us to foster the abilities and foster the environment to ensure that all of us can grow and be able to embrace our community and ensure that our community is cared for in a way that is dignified and recognizing and realizing our agency. So that's the beginning of the Rohingya Maìyafuìnor Collaborative Network, and we're very, very happy to be here, although it is with a heavy heart that we continue to face issues, and I just really hope that one day organizations like us will no longer be needed, and that would be a day that we all celebrate. Thank you.
Very eloquently put, very thought-provoking. Thank you so much, Yasmin, for also sharing the harrowing account of experiences of Rohingya women and girls. And we all stand in solidarity with Rohingya women and girls. You had mentioned in your remarks just now aid and resources, and that brings me to my next question for Brother Raïss. Brother Raïss, as the founder of the Rohingya Human Rights Network, you've been deeply involved in humanitarian efforts, including efforts to preserve the identity and the memory of Rohingya community. Now, both the US and the Canadian government have provided significant financial aid to address the Rohingya crisis. In your view, has this aid been effectively allocated? And what improvements do you feel can be made to ensure that the aid and the funding reaches to those most in need?
That's a very technical question. I will not pretend to be a full subject matter expert on aid. I'm not a big fan of aid myself. Like Sister Yasmin said, we are only effective, or aid organizations are only effective when they cease to exist. It's only, this perpetual Western or Western-made style of having organizations that keep collecting tens of millions of dollars on aid for their own, for their own sustainment. A lot of them for their own nice fancy hotels and pajeros and nice cars that they drive in the refugee camps and in other UN settings all across the world. When I volunteered back in Haiti, you would know when a UN car is coming because they are the nicest cars. When I volunteered back in South Africa, you would know when a UNHCR car's vehicles coming, or so all of the so aid becomes like a big giant, and that's perhaps my answer to your question, that a lot of it is actually put into resources that are not directly going to the refugees themselves or to the people, the impacted communities. That is why, even while I was back in Haiti, for example, I noticed, and that was the beginning of my humanitarian work. I noticed that grassroots organizations that are very much run by people like you and me, who go out there out of benevolence, and they start building something that's very grassroots. And then they start working with communities directly because they don't have all this infrastructure, they don't have these fancy hotels, they don't have these nice cars. And they work with communities, and they know exactly what the communities require in Port-au-Prince, in Léogâne, in those different towns where the earthquake took place. Similarly, Ecuador, so same case in the refugee camps, wherever, or in the villages, wherever you've got people who are, grassroots, who are going in there and who are connecting with people. Let it be, let's say, in the case of situation of Myanmar, you do not have access. So people who are constantly in communication, like our projects in Mongdao and Akyab, I speak to them almost on a daily basis. So I know, for example, which township, which village has just come under attack, and how many people have run away, and how many families are in need. And so whatever we send, alhamdulillah, we cover everything. We promise our donors 100% funds to the grounds. I put in my own money to cover cost of, there's inevitably costs that are associated, banking, remittance fees, and etc. I cover it out of my own pockets. Every time I go to the refugee camps, I go take my own ticket and I go there. But alhamdulillah, through efforts like this, we are not the only ones. There are other people who have similar grassroots initiatives, and those are the most effective ones, in my opinion. You require these large multilateral and bilateral aid that comes from the US government and the Canadian government and EU and etc. Because they come in large numbers, they come in millions, if not. And we actually advocated for it. So the last time I did, the Canadian government renewed its funding for the Rohingya back in 2021. I campaigned with a professor out of McMaster University, mashallah, a good ally of Justice for All. Her name is Dr. Alia Khan. So we reached out to 30 members of parliament from all different parties. So we did. So all of that, and the outcome coming out of it, $228 million. So all of that is required, but is it utilized to the maximum efficiency? even not being a full subject matter expert, being somebody who goes to the grounds, who goes to refugee camps almost every year. Alhamdulillah, some of our projects in Aceh as well as in Malaysia, Pakistan. So I have an idea of how this aid activity or aid money, international aid money, is spent with all the other costs that are associated. So that would be my take on this, and hence to my viewers or to all my colleagues, most effective form of aid is grassroots work that builds capacity, most importantly, builds capacity in the refugee camps, in the villages, in the population, so that, you know, the aid money is not required anymore. Inshallah, we become self-sufficient one day. You know, we don't, you know, we are not successful until the people are not dependent on us, until they know how to fish and not keep relying on the fish that we are giving them.
There was definitely a lot of expertise and a lot of perspective in your answer, and it definitely opened up my eyes to the system of aid and the difference between spoon feeding and agency and autonomy. So thank you so much for that. In interest of time, I want to follow up this question with the same question for all of our panelists. So we'll start again from the beginning cycle with Siti, just in terms of policy recommendations. So the three of you have made references to the Canadian and the US governments. Based on your ongoing on-the-ground experiences and the challenges that you're seeing with refugees and the different successes that you've had in terms of seeing what works from an advocacy in campaigning perspective, what doesn't, what specific policies or actions do you feel that the Canadian and the US government should implement to be more effective to support Rohingya communities, both at home, in Myanmar-Burma, in the largest refugee camp in the world, Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, as well as the diaspora populations, the refugees, the asylum seekers that you're seeking. So in a quick couple minutes, policy recommendations for the US/Canadian government. Siti, will begin with you.
Sounds good. I feel like more aid focused on the Rohingya-led initiative and organization is really important. Especially those aid that support education and also psychosocial support. That would really help dignifies and also recognize the Rohingya urgency. And I feel like it is also important that the international community, especially the Muslim community in North America, realize their role and the importance of their contribution to all of this program beyond just the financial support. But as of right now, the financial support would be the main plea that we have in order for our program to be continued and also be successful. And I feel like the issue of not having access to education, we will still continue to advocate for it at the top level with the government, but while we wait for it, why not support initiative? Once again, that is led by the refugee. And why, these are just the question that came to mind, like why can't funding from the US government goes directly to the community just to ensure that they are actually being properly supported and are used to be able to expand the program at the fullest capacity. And yeah, that's what I think about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yasmin, whatever demands, policy recommendations to the Canadian government/US government on this issue in general?
Well, there's a few things. And of course, I never run out of things to say, unfortunately. But I think the three main things that we'd like to see is, of course, underscoring what Brother Raïss and Siti has already mentioned. You know, aid should come directly to the communities and to Rohingya-led organizations. I think that would be the most effective way of actually addressing the missing pieces, and to ensure that aid is used and extended to its fullest capacity. We know how to stretch a dollar really, really far because we've had to do it all our lives. And so why not use us instead of use, all of these gigantic humanitarian organizations? Sure, they have more credibility, but when the work gets done, we get more done within the community than many of these big organizations. Now, not to toot our horn either, it's important to know that we know where exactly the money is needed and how to actually use it effectively in order to be sustainable in the long run. And that is the distinction between, big aid organizations and us. Second thing is to ensure that there is an ending in sight. Accountability cannot be left out of this conversation. The Canadian government and the US government, by extension, have not sanctioned the military oil and gas company. And through these revenues, the military oil and gas companies is owned by the military, of course. And this route of funding, or the revenues that they generate, they actually use this to buy more weapons to terrorize Rohingya and many other groups across Burma, Myanmar. On top of that, we have China as a big player in all of this, and China plays both sides. China also funds a lot of weapons and ammunition to the Arakan army. So I think it comes down to how much we're willing to push further. Accountability doesn't just end by saying there are 2 court cases, 3 if we count Argentina, universal jurisdiction case. We have the ICJ and we have the ICC. That should be enough. But what does it do to the current, suffering of the victims who have been stuck in the camps for the past 7 years with dwindling funds, with dwindling, food rations, and less stability? I think that accountability needs to be a more encompassing framework. We need to extend it further than just justice is a court case or a ruling from a judge. It needs to go further to rehabilitate, to transcend into uplifting the community out of poverty, out of the lack of freedom and the lack of agency. I think that we need to go beyond just talking to 2 or 3 actors, North America or the Global South or this and that. It's not either or. We need all hands on deck. And in that sense, it comes down to the third point, which is we need to re-engage a lot of the groups that are key players in Burma, Myanmar. In order for Rohingya to no longer suffer, we need to go back home. And that is a resounding plea that the Rohingya community have had all along, ever since we were expelled, ever since we were dealing with all of these atrocity. We want to go back home, but we want our rights to be restored. We want not just citizenship, but also our ethnic status to be recognized and re-recognized. In order to do that, we need to actually do away with this ethno-nationalism that is prevalent to this day and is rampant, and it's the ideological flaw within, the Burma Myanmar democratic movement as well. How do we do that? The Rohingya community needs support in order to actually engage and ensure that other groups understand our belonging is not negotiable in the country. We need the NUG to actually feel the pressure that without understanding and ensuring the rights of Rohingya are restored, there is no legitimacy in their, quote unquote, government or their status as a government. Even if they are, propped up as a resistant government, they don't have any teeth right now. And they require the recognition from the international parties and actors. So this is a dwindling window of opportunity that everybody has in order to advocate and push further. But specifically for the Rohingya, in order for our belonging to be stamped deep into this narratives that is Burma Myanmar, in this nation that is Burma Myanmar, the process needs to start now, where Rohingya are actually part and parcels of the rebuilding of this nation. And without pushing the Canadian government and pushing the US government to further pressure the NUG or pressure other actors that they would not be recognized as a resistance force or, as a group that fights for democracy without recognizing the Rohingya rights and ensuring that every aspect of their dealings with us comes with justice and fairness and ensuring, inclusion. We won't go anywhere. And so those are my 3 points. And I really, really hope that all of you will reach out and we'd be able to, find ways to collaborate. We don't want to just always ask for money or ask for aid, but as of now, we are desperately in need of ensuring that people survive until other actors really understand that they have a role in all of this and ensuring that they step in to do their jobs. But for now, I hope that the Rohingya plight will not be forgotten and that all of us will keep, at the very least, keep the Rohingya in your prayers.
Very well said. And I really appreciate the international legal perspective that really helped to highlight this webinar today. And moving on, and last but not least again, and to help us conclude our program, Raïss, your recommendations, demands to the North American governments today.
So after all these years of activism, some of it going just down the drain without any, much effect, more and more I come to understand and conclude that at the core of everything are the people who are on the grounds, people who are suffering, who are really taking the brunt of it. The people in the villages and the people in the refugee camps and people who perish in the human trafficking boats. As a matter of fact, one of my core teammates from my team in the refugee camps perished in the ocean, him and his family. He actually has an interview on CBC. I was just going through it the other day. So, enough of all of the, for any good reason or bad, the attention that comes to the diaspora communities and other communities, because it doesn't do much good. All right. We are, alhamdulillah, I am the most privileged Rohingya out there. I would be first to come out and say that, I have food on my table. I got a shelter on top of my head. My relatives are not getting bombed into pieces. The ones who are right around me. I don't have to see dead bodies wash on the other side of the river. So I got a career. I'm in good company, alhamdulillah, So yes. And so it becomes my responsibility, myself and my fellow brother Muslims and brothers and sisters in the Muslim community, outside the Muslim community, the human rights community, as well, of course, including my brothers and sisters in the Rohingya. We have a responsibility to give it to put our focus and our attention on what serves specifically those who are on the grounds, build their capacity, make them stand on their feet, make them independent. And they are capable. It's just that they need this support. And that's where international advocacy should also be focused towards. So as we just talked about all the aid, the International Court of Justice and all the legal mechanism where tons of dollars, millions of dollars are getting spent. But how does it translate to the grounds? That's one classic example. But also now bring it back to how it translates to our own community, to our own, the Muslim community at large, let's say here in Canada, because the number of Rohingya families are very, very, very small, very limited. So how does our actions, are we always looking for advocacy towards the government, towards an external actor, towards the US and Canada, to the EU? Are they the only ones who are helping us? That is our source of help? No, the fact of the matter is, we are responsible for our own actions. Allah Ta'ala will not change our conditions again. Until we have bona fide changes within ourselves. We have to understand that, let's say, the Palestinian struggle, for example, is very, very much in line with the Rohingya struggle. The Sudanese struggle, anywhere where there is an oppression, has a direct correlation with the Rohingya struggle. I'm appalled to hear from some communities, including my own community. I'm not going to name anybody, but there are community members, prominent community members in Kitchener-Waterloo, who in private conversation will be like, why should we go to this? Why should we, spearhead this? have they ever come out, the Palestinians come out and spearheaded our cause? Astaghfirullah, you know? But that kind of attitude, that kind of mentality needs to change. You know, I've heard another example, I've heard a very prominent sister, and she's not alone in our international activism, who was going about congratulating, you know, not to name again, some Canadian official on this new position, a new post that he has just assumed, while knowing that that individual or these elected officials are constantly denying the genocide of the Palestinians, are constantly siding with the Israelis. You know, we can't allow that two-faced attitude and two-faced approach of politicians to just pass by and you know, utilize some little meager opportunities that we have to gain advantage, to look good, to appease with them, to gain media spotlight. No, that's hypocrisy. We cannot because we cannot have the Palestinian struggle or any other struggle, human rights struggle, get condoned for an advantage of ourselves. So these kinds of things and anything else, even amongst whatever we do, if we are directing it exclusively to the diaspora community, if we are directing it for gain or benefit of the diaspora community, that is wrong in itself, or of the community here in North America, that is wrong in itself. Because at the end of the day, we have to ask. When I used to volunteer with Engineers Without Borders, you know, the founder, who's a very George Order, I really look up to him back in university, he used to say, you know, back in the village, whenever he would go to the village in Malawi, they had operations in Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and he would say, I would always ask the question, how does this action affect Dorothy? So I'm going to ask myself, every time I go to the refugee camps, I ask myself a question, how does my action affect, you know, Mahmudullah? How does it affect Kulsum? You know, if it doesn't affect the 3-year-old Kulsum, it's not good, you know? If my fundraising or whatever I've done doesn't impact them directly, doesn't empower them, then it's no good. If it's something for myself, then, you know, it's no good. So this is what we need to change. We need to change our attitudes, come out of our daily, myself, my job, my career, you know, my time on screen, this, and go towards whatever is actual, what is real, and what Allah and His Rasul did. The Rasulullah and his Sahaba did, and Allah has commanded us that it is for those who are really in need. You do it sincerely with your heart. And that's where I would call the advocacy towards, not always externally, but this time internally, inshallah.
And Justice for All Canada pledges to continue this conversation so that we can have the honor of hearing important and strong Rohingya voices, such as yourself, Brother Raïss. Thank you for sharing that. And with that, we are at the end of the program. I wanted to thank our esteemed speakers. It's been an honor to speak with you and to learn from you. And as I mentioned, we're going to keep this advocacy going, and we'll keep the education and the awareness efforts going as we are continually inspired by your tireless efforts. Justice for All Canada calls on the United States and Canada to renew its commitment to addressing the Rohingya crisis and genocide, including establishing an emergency immigration pathway for Rohingya refugees and creating a consultative body with experts such as the ones that we've heard today to amplify their voices. We need increased refugee resettlement. We need enhanced transparency in aid distribution, and a stronger international advocacy effort are essential that should be spearheaded by North American governments. The US and Canada should restore its leadership in human rights by taking decisive action on the Rohingya crisis. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us. For those who attended and registered, we will be sharing with you information about each of our panelists or respective organizations, their social media handles, and how you can get in touch. And with that, I wish you all a good rest of your day. Thank you so much for your support, and take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.